Welcome to my ranking of train-related movies. So basically films that either take place on trains or in train stations or on train tracks. I only decided to include movies which are absolutely associated with trains though. So no films where we get maybe 10 minutes on a train and then the rest of the film is somewhere else. So something like From Russia with Love would not qualify. In that film, I think Bond spends about 20 minutes on a train, but the rest of the movie is somewhere else. So I wouldn't allow something like that. Same with Predator 2. There is a very good train sequence in that film, but you wouldn't really call it a train movie. I mean, if I got to the end of this ranking and said, right, here's my number one train movie, Predator 2, it wouldn't really sound right, would it? Now, the only trouble with imposing these conditions upon myself is that I therefore found it quite difficult to come up with a lot of ideas for this. I did eventually get to 10 films. In fact, I got to 11. So we've got a ranking of 10 today, plus one honourable mention. The film which didn't quite get in is the animated film The Polar Express. Now, bizarrely, I could have put this film at number 1, or I could have put it bottom, because it is a very special movie to me. I'm just not sure if I personally would watch it more than the other films we're going to get to. So The Polar Express is a film that we in the family watch every Christmas Eve. It's a film which is special to my family, if not necessarily me individually. I think we've watched it on Christmas Eve like 7 or 8 years in a row. It's a really great film. We always watch it with the kids. We have hot chocolate, we get takeaway, but not once have I ever put it on and watched it isolated. So for that reason, I'm leaving it at the very bottom today. It's therefore the honourable mention. It's not on the main list. So let's get into the main list, and we'll start, of course, with the film which only comes 10th. So we're going to go from worst to best, starting at 10. So straight off the bat, we have Under Siege 2. Even though this one's finished really low, I do like both Under Siege films. I wish Seagal had carried on making these, actually. But of the two we got, I think this one's my favourite, just because I really like trains. There's nothing particularly deep in terms of story or characters. It's just a great chance to watch Seagal as Casey Ryback obliterate 25 or so terrorists. It's just really good, dumb fun, and I will go back to it every few years. And this film taught me two very important life lessons. One, assumption is the mother of all fuck-ups. And number two, never have affairs with work colleagues. This one's a horror film. We've got quite a few horrors on today's ranking, actually. This one's about a London cop who comes to the realisation that there's a cannibal, or possibly more than one cannibal, living in the London Underground. So he starts to investigate this, but unlike Under Siege 2, there is much more emphasis on character with this one than there is with any kind of action or gore. I got a different experience out of this than I was expecting from looking at the back of the Blu-ray box. It's a very thought-provoking film. It's got a lot to say about society. It is quite slow-moving, but it does build to quite a satisfying conclusion. And yeah, I definitely recommend this. Christopher Lee puts in a cameo. Donald Pleasance, though, is the main reason that you should watch it, because his performance is absolutely superb. This is a thriller about an attorney played by Gene Hackman who has to get this witness, played by Anne Archer, to trial so she can testify against a mob boss or something. But Anne Archer lives in quite a remote location, so the only way that Hackman can get her to the courthouse is by train, but it's through this really desolate, mountainous landscape, which makes me think possibly the film's set in Canada or somewhere, but I'm not entirely sure. But once they're on this train, there are representatives of the mob boss trying to kill both Gene Hackman and Anne Archer. But what makes this film so exciting is the fact that you've no idea for the longest time which people on the train are trying to get them. So it's really exciting. It's not a well-known film, but I've seen it 2 or 3 times on TV in the past, and I've really, really enjoyed it each time. But however you can get hold of this, whether by some kind of old DVD copy or renting it, it's absolutely worth checking out. Another thriller, this one starring Liam Neeson, and I'm pretty sure it takes place in New York on one of the train networks they've got around there. So basically, Liam Neeson is just some random, normal guy going to work. He's a commuter, you know, and he gets approached by Vera Farmiga of Conjuring fame, and basically Liam Neeson gets embroiled in this plot where he has to carry out certain tasks on a train, or somebody's going to die somewhere else, or something's going to get blown up. I can't actually remember the plot for this. I only saw it about a year ago. I just remember Liam Neeson running around on this train trying to prevent something really bad from happening, and most of the rest of the train are completely unaware of what he's going through. But it's just really exciting. There's lots of twists and turns. Liam Neeson puts in a really great performance, as you always get out of him, and I thoroughly recommend this film. I really enjoyed it. Just the other day, I was in a supermarket and I spotted this for £2 on Blu-ray, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get that and add it to my shelf, because I really enjoyed it when I watched it on Amazon or wherever it was. But my kids ran down the aisle and I had to chase after them, and I just ended up not buying the Blu-ray. Totally a missed opportunity, because very, very good film. This is another one that takes place on the London Underground in England. I was actually on the Underground tube about 3 days ago. Thankfully, I didn't think of this film at the time. So this is about a German girl who is played by the same woman who is Matt Damon's love interest in The Bourne Identity. And she basically gets trapped in the Underground tube station after they've locked it up for the night. And it just so happens that there is this really freaky half-mutant man living down there who's lived down there his whole life, so he's never blended in with society. So this foreign girl, she goes on the run from this mutant through all these underground tunnels and various underground structures and things that are down there. Along the way, she does meet some people who could potentially help her. There's a couple of Scottish homeless people at one point, I think. The film is very, very exciting. It's really thrilling, and I've got this one on DVD. I've seen it maybe 3 or 4 times over the years. It is a film, though, which doesn't really get talked about, because I think there's a more famous horror film called Creep that gets more acclaim than this one. I've not seen the more famous version of Creep. I think it's about a guy with like a multiple personality disorder or something. That is not this film. This is about a mutant in the London Underground. But check this one out. It's absolutely worth it. Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, doing a horror film together on a train. What could be better than that? Well, 4 more movies actually, but we'll come to those. So I think this one takes place in Russia. I'm going to sound like an idiot if I'm wrong, but I think it's in Russia. So there's all these characters taking this big long train journey through this snowy, mountainous sort of area, and there are some fossilised remains in the cargo section of the train, but they come to life. It's like an alien creature that's actually still alive, even though the museum curator who is in charge of this particular bit of cargo thinks that it's dead. It's not. This film is sort of like John Carpenter's The Thing, but on a train, because this creature can sort of imitate other people and acquire their skills. Don't be thinking that you're going to get the special effects that you get in The Thing. You don't. It's quite a cheesy film, but it's a lot of fun. It's quite clever. There's lots of interesting ideas used in this film. And Telly Savalas randomly turns up halfway through as like a Russian army colonel or something. That's quite a funny little, wouldn't call it a cameo, but it's a funny little role that he's got. Lee and Cushing are great as ever, and thoroughly recommend this. I've got the Blu-ray, but I think it's in the public domain. I think you can watch this on YouTube for free. I think. Don't hold it against me if I'm wrong, though. This is a horror film which takes place in the New York underground subway system. So what I should have said about The Commuter earlier on, actually, is that takes place on the overground train network of New York. This one's underground. It's got a similar story to Creep, I suppose. So we've got these 4 or 5 partygoers who are on a stag night, and they try and get a train home, and they end up basically getting trapped after hours down in the subway system. Now with this one, I think they get on a train, and the train accidentally stops at a station which has been shut down and abandoned for years. I think the driver quickly realises the error and drives on, but by that point, these partygoers have got off at the wrong station, obviously, and they're trapped down there. And unfortunately, there are also a bunch of really dangerous hobos down there, and they will club anybody to death who just happens to be on their terrain. So what we've got here is like a chase movie that goes on throughout the New York Underground as these youngsters try and get away from these homeless people. It's quite violent and gory. The characters in it are reasonable. A couple of people turn out to be much better characters than you think in the beginning. And yeah, I really like this one. I saw it for the first time on Sky about 10 years ago, and just recently I ordered a DVD online because it's always a film that I've remembered, and I decided to revisit it recently, and it was just as good as I recalled. And just like that, we're back in London again, this time on the Overground. So this is a story about 10, 12 people who are taking the last train of the night down south out of London into Kent somewhere, and the train breaks down in a woodlanded area and werewolves come out of the trees and start to attack the train. They can't get this train moving in, there's something wrong with it. But it's a very exciting film because they have to kind of protect the train. They have to make it a fortress against these werewolves, but obviously they can't hold out forever. And they start to get picked off one by one. The special effects of the werewolves are actually pretty decent, given the fact that it is a reasonably low budget film. But I really like this. It's not particularly well known, but you should absolutely check this one out too. So we're back in New York again. We seem to have spent a lot of this ranking just bouncing between London and New York. This time we're focused on the Overground section of track somewhere. I don't know which borough. It's next to an ocean that Emily Blunt takes this particular train ride every day to work. And one day out of her window she spots a murder or somebody being violent to somebody, and she takes it upon herself to investigate this. But this puts her life in peril, and her job ends up under threat, and her relationship's suddenly in trouble. I can't remember all the twists and turns that happen throughout this, but it's very exciting to follow. It's not easy to figure out how this is all going to resolve itself or who's behind what. It's really good. It's got Rebecca Ferguson in it as well. And I guess the only other thing that I'll add when it comes to this is that even though I've put it at number 2, it's not like this is massively better than something like Deathline at number 9. This ranking has got a lot of equally good films for me personally. It was very hard to get the right order. I mean, I didn't spend that long on it, but if I was going to redo this video like 5 years from now with the exact same films, I might end up just putting them in a really different order, especially if I wasn't allowed to consult back to this video. So bear that in mind, because when I think of this film at number 2 and say Deathline at number 9, it's like, well, there's not that much between them. But anyway, this is how it came out, and it's now time to check out what film I put at number 1. So at number 1, I've gone for one of Jamie Lee Curtis's films from her Scream Queen sort of era that she went through, and this is one of the best. It takes place in Canada, so we're not in New York or London for a change. It's about a group of medical students who are going on some kind of trip. It's going to be an overnight stay on this train. I don't know precisely where they're heading, but a killer gets on board the train and starts picking them off, and this particular person has a grudge against these medical students because of a prank gone wrong 12 months previous. And what gives this film a little bit of an edge over other horror films that have taken place on trains is the fact that they're all in fancy dress, and the killer keeps switching his fancy dress throughout the movie just to better his chances of staying hidden. But it's very, very well made, and I would say one of the better slashers from the greatest slasher era of all time, the early 80s. So that is the end of my top 10 films that involve trains. Do let me know some of your train-related favourite films that maybe I've left off the list. There are a couple of films I wanted to include, but I just didn't get around to seeing in time. So one of them is Murder on the Orient Express. I just keep putting off watching that film. Maybe I'm just not that interested in watching it, I guess. And the other one I actually did start to watch about 2 weeks ago. It's called Midnight Meat Train. It's got Vinnie Jones in it. And I started watching it. I was enjoying it, but I just got too tired to finish it off. So it's a shame I couldn't do that, but that is one that I'm definitely going to finish at some point. Right, that's the end of today's video. I do hope you enjoyed that, and I will be back for another one very, very soon. Until then, cheerio, bye-bye.